It's always a fun moment when we first have those just a few people. There's 11 of you watching right now, which is always sort of fun. But now we just jumped up. So here you go for your pep talk. And I'm going to start right in because I'm not going to take your Sunday evenings for a full hour. That's works for politics chat, but this is only a little bit about politics. I got a lot of messages over the last week, and I'm seeing certainly comments on social media that people are really freaking out at the amount of crap coming out of the Trump administration already. It's only been a week. You keep hearing this again and again. It's only been a week. It's only been a week. I want to tell you a couple of things. First of all, this is a deliberate strategy to exhaust you. You do not have to pay attention to everything that's happening. In part, a lot of it is simply designed to destabilize the country. So if you were to read some of those executive orders that he has come down with in a flurry, some of them are just fluff. They don't mean anything. My favorite of all of them is the one that instructs the people in his administration to bring prices down. Okay, I would happily instruct you all to stop gravity. I mean that it means absolutely nothing. So that flurry is a deliberate political tactic to exhaust people and to make them afraid. So being aware of that to start with is really important. But here's the next piece of it. And this is really important. If you are constantly reacting to what somebody else is doing, you have ceded to them the ability to shape your reality. That is, if you are, and you probably know this from relationships in your own life, if you are constantly reacting to somebody, they're the ones who get to decide what the conversation is. And they're the ones who get to decide how you're going to react to it. And they're the ones who, I always think of it as building a box. They've built a box rhetorically, and you can't get out of it because you're constantly arguing with them. And you've seen this with MAGA for a long time. No matter what you say, they say, well, what about? What aboutism, right? And that's designed to trap you in a conversation that is impossible to win by definition because those goalposts keep changing. So what the reason I wanted to jump on here today is partly because I know people were freaking out and partly to tell you a different way to behave and to tell you something else that is going on. So while you are sitting there clutching and frightened, and mind you, I'm not downplaying the seriousness of what's happening. There's a lot of really serious stuff going on that is a direct attack on American democracy with the intent to create a dictatorship. That's going on for sure. But do not lose sight of the fact that there is a ton of power sloshing around in Washington. If I ask you right now to identify who in Washington is wielding the power, what's your answer? You're not going to be able to come up with it because it is not clear who is in charge. So you have a president who has been elected by a majority of the Electoral College. Remember, although he won the popular vote, he did not win a majority of the American people because the voters split their votes between Kamala Harris and a few to other candidates. At the same time, we now know that voter suppression played a huge role in this election. So really, you've got a president who is claiming a landslide, but he's claiming a landslide because he knows he does not have one. So he's in power, but not in a huge way. He's also gotten control of the House of Representatives and the Senate. There too, he's controlling the House of Representatives because of gerrymandering in states like North Carolina. He does not have a landslide there. He does not have a supermajority. And in the Senate, the Republicans have 3 seats. Okay, that's a majority, but it's not an overwhelming majority. So you've got all these different groups that are trying to claim that they have a lot of power, but it's not clear that they do have that power. So what you're seeing is things like the rise of people like like Elon Musk. Who's he? What's he doing in the midst of all this? And at the same time, you've got all these people sort of grasping for power and jockeying for power. Remember, the Republican Party itself is split between the MAGA Republicans, who are all Trump all the time, and other Republicans who are going along with them, although they don't like the idea of imposing Christian nationalism on the country. And then you have still another group of people fighting within the Republican Party between the MAGA Republicans who are racists and sexist and really care about the lower class in America, and the tech bros who are taking the exact opposite position and who both have supported Donald Trump because they want him to destroy the United States government. But they want very different things from that administration. So you've got this real tangle going up. At the same time, you have a president who is, if anybody is going to argue with me that he is mentally incapable right now, I would love to see your evidence for it, because he is a wreck. I mean, he can't, he's just reacting to things and not seemingly having very much sense of even how to put a sentence together. If you have watched the news today, he is starting a fight with the country of Colombia. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. I'm not going to go into the details now, but really? I mean, this is not how you solve anything unless you're a really, really angry toddler. So all of these pieces are there, and there's all this power sloshing around. And there is a reason that Congress critters are not picking up that power. And part of it is that a lot of them don't have spines. They are desperate to be reelected to the Senate, for example, and they're afraid of Trump for one reason or another. But it's not just that. Part of it is that those people who hate Donald Trump, and remember, there's only probably about 14 estimated senators, Republican senators, who like Trump. The rest of the how many is that? If there's a total of 53, and you take away, I'm going to call it 13, that's, what is that, 30 left? I can't do math, something like that. They don't like him. They wish he would go away, but they don't dare to speak up against him or to make too great a stand against him, because they're afraid he's going to punish them. And he's going to punish them by saying, gee, that was a nice military installation where your constituents worked. Pity we can't find any funding for it. Or, God, I guess you didn't really want that bridge as badly as you said you did. And so I think there are a lot of reasons that Congress people are pulling their punches, because they're afraid to be the ones with their necks out there. All right, so as all this power is sloshing around, one of the things that I'm seeing among people like you and me is people waiting for somebody else to pick up that power. This is the moment for the American people to say, hang on just a red hot minute here. It's my country. Those are my tax dollars. And this is what I want the government to do. And to reshape the way we approach this moment from saying, I got to stop this, I got to stop this, I'm afraid of this, to saying, hang on a minute, I care deeply about cancer research, one of the things that Trump has stopped money for. I care deeply about the Organization of American States, one of the institutions that Trump is now trying to undermine. I care deeply about rights for blind people, something that is quite possibly on the chopping block. Those things are ways to define America in this moment as something other than what Trump is trying to kill, because that takes the initiative away from him and away from his people and gives it back to us. And I'm going to talk more about how to do that in just a minute. But I want to make it clear that what Trump is doing in this first week, and mind you, I want to be clear, I think Trump cares profoundly about staying out of jail. And he cares profoundly about being liked, and he wants beaucoup bucks. That's all he cares about. He doesn't care about any of the other stuff he's talking about. He doesn't care about Christianity. He doesn't care about abortion. He doesn't care about any of that stuff. He just wants to be the person on the big screen, is the bottom line. So what he is doing and what is really happening is the people who said that they were writing executive orders, for example, from Project 2025 were, just as people like me said all along, and that the legacy media both sides and said, well, Trump says he doesn't know anything about this, he's not doing it. clearly some of the executive orders have been picked up virtually verbatim from Project 2025. So I think that people like those in charge of Project 2025 from Heritage, who are tightly connected to Viktor Orban's government in Hungary, or that are tightly connected to to the New Apostolic Reformation, the people who are trying to put in place Christian government in the United States are using Trump. And they're using him in really interesting ways. And one of those ways is that if you've wondered how he can stop all the funding for, as I say, the National Institutes of Health, which I wrote about the other night, the successes of NIH and of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and for the different aspects of our government have been extraordinary. And not to say they don't make mistakes. I mean, one of my big sayings is humans got a human. We all make mistakes. As institutions, these things have done enormous good for Americans, but also for people around the world. And one of the ways, there's two ways it appears that they are trying to get him to stop supporting this government that people like me love. And one of them is called impoundment. And impoundment is a president saying, I don't care what Congress said it was going to fund. I don't believe in that, so I'm going to keep those funds back. And that was something that Richard Nixon did. And so in 1974, Congress outlawed it. There's a law against doing that. Now, people who are behind Project 2025 and now people who are in the Trump administration are saying that they believe that law is unconstitutional. So they are challenging it and saying we can do that. And that's, of course, what they did in 2019 when they stopped funding for Ukraine from going forward until then new President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine did smear Joe Biden. That was the deal there. And then they released it and said, oh, we didn't actually mean it. Now they're saying we can do that. And they're saying we're not going to fund these things. Now, my guess is what they're hoping is that people will come do whatever Trump wants. Say, please give me back the money for my district. Please give me back the money for this. And I will go ahead and rubber stamp these other things you want. That's my guess, that's the plan behind it. But think about it. Do you want the president to be able to do that? Do you want the president, one person, to be able to say, no, I don't care that Congress wants to fund, safety on our airlines. I think that that's a waste of money. So I don't care about airlines. We lose a few planes. No skin off my nose. I've got Air Force One. Do you want that? The bottom line is that nobody wants that, because unless they are stupid enough to think that they're 100% going to be on that dictator's team, they know it's only a question of time until their ox gets gored as well. So they're using the Impoundment Act with the idea that by the time that gets challenged, and by the time that with luck Trump loses it in the courts, the facts on the ground will have changed to the point it doesn't matter. You take away funding for medical research for a year and a half, all of those experiments are in the toilet. All those people have found jobs elsewhere, probably in private industry. All of that has gone away, and the American people through the United States government are no longer involved in that. So I suspect what they're really trying to do is change those facts on the ground in the short term while we're all going, oh my God, what are we going to do next? The other thing that you saw last night, I'm sorry, I've lost track of time. Maybe it is today Sunday. It was Saturday, I guess. Is the deliberate breaking of a law that Congress wrote in 2022 in response to something that Trump had done in his first term, and that's the firing of the inspectors general. And I wrote about that the other night. If you care, you can go read about it. But I guess it was last night. But that is independent oversight of the government. And by breaking that law, by quite openly breaking that law, now, interestingly enough, Trump didn't admit that he had broken the law. He said, oh, this is common for people to do. It is 100% not common for people to do. And they wrote a law to prevent him from doing it. And yet, even people like Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas, who voted for that law, have said it's okay that Trump broke it. Is it okay with you that your president breaks a law? It's not okay with me. And again, the Supreme Court has said that he can't be criminally prosecuted for things that happen under his powers in the Constitution. We'll see how that plays out. But But at the end of the day, this is our choice as to whether or not we're going to keep a president like that. So I think those are the two things that they're really pushing right now. Impoundment to destroy the government that we, people like me, love. Again, I'm just saying there's not everything I love in the US government, let me tell you, but our institutions and our idea that this is that we the people have a say in our government, I care a lot about that. So I think that that's the two things that they are trying to really hit on, so that by the time the courts say, we don't know what you're smoking, but you better put it down, they're going to say, well, it doesn't really matter anyway, because we don't have a transportation safety board any longer. We don't have an NIH any longer. And it's much harder to build than it is to destroy, like I've talked about. All right. So if the American people, that is you people here, are going to take back that power, that power that's sloshing around. And again, I want to be really clear. In systems that are already dictatorships, that power is not sloshing around. That dictator has that power. That dictator is in power. It's always a he, is in power, has a force around him, has people terrified, has control of the money and all those things. We are not in that position right now in the United States. Power is sloshing around. And now is the time to disrupt that. Trump is incredibly erratic. He is getting more erratic, and he's going to make bigger and bigger and bigger mistakes. And as he does that, there's an argument that we should just sit back and let that happen. I disagree. I think that we can make that happen faster, and we can take back that power in a number of ways. All right. So some of the ways to take back that power. First of all, our language in the United States needs to change. Like, one of the things that the MAGA Republicans did very effectively was constantly to make a lot of noise about how much they were mad about the Biden administration, especially over inflation. Now, have you heard much about inflation lately? Just so you know, the price of eggs has gone up between 37% and 67%. Now, it's gone up because of the avian flu, and that actually mirrors the same thing that happened early in the Biden administration. But MAGA Republicans cut absolutely no slack to the Biden administration for the fact that there was a flu and therefore a culling of those animals in the early administration. How about we speak up a little bit about the price of eggs? Oh, wait. Breakfast itself is going to get more expensive because he's just declared this fight against Colombia. 25% tariffs on goods from Colombia to go up to 50% in 2 weeks unless Colombia does what he says. How do you feel about coffee? Making these points repeatedly and in public, whether on social media, letters to the editor, and talking to people, that's how you change the public conversation. But I'm not going to stop there. There was a really interesting poll that came out on the 24th out of the Associated Press NORC, and that's a really, really good polling industry. And it took a look at how many Americans approve of the fact that Trump is taking advice from billionaires. And that number was 12%. 12% of Americans think it is really good or somewhat good that Trump is taking advice from billionaires. 60% think it's a terrible idea, and the people who are in between don't even know it's happening. So if there is one thing that Americans can agree on historically, it's that we don't think that billionaires, that extremely rich people, should be dictating out to our government. That's another thing really to hit on, because that's not about Democrats or Republicans or independents or even MAGAs. A lot of MAGA people got involved with MAGA because of the idea that elites had taken over the government. And that was something that Trump and his ilk used very effectively, and Republicans as well used very effectively, to make people vote for policies that moved $50 trillion from the bottom 90% of Americans to the top 1% of Americans between 1981 and 2021, when Joe Biden took office and began to reverse that. People ask me all the time for that citation. Google Time Magazine and 90% to 1%, 50 trillion, and it comes up. It's the first thing that comes up. It's based on a much larger study, but that's the easiest place to find it. Let's talk about those billionaires, people like Elon Musk, who are calling the shots in the United States. What do you think they're going to spend our tax dollars on? Because this is always our tax dollars. Where do you think those tax dollars are going to go if Elon Musk is behind it? Aid to veterans, which I care deeply about? Not a chance. The man wants to get to Mars. That's what he's really pushing for. How about the January 6th criminals who have been released into our streets? All that about how foreign countries were dumping their criminals into the United States. And who dumps criminals into the United States? Donald Trump. And these are people that we have on tape assaulting police officers with stun guns and with poles and with metal whips and with furniture and with bike racks. Is that really what Americans want? And the answer to that is no. The vast majority of Americans did not want those people to be released. That was something that Trump did for his base. Another thing there to hammer. And I just got to do a shout out here to Mike Fanone, whom I've gotten to know over the last several years. He's a fabulous, fabulous guy. I would, you know, I don't know the others, but man, I would bet on Mike Fanone over any of these people who stormed the Capitol. Here's another one. If you think about what matters in America, what brings people together in America, you know, I'm always talking about the idea that you have a right to be treated equally before the law and you have a right to a say in your government. And those are foundational to the Declaration of Independence. But isn't what really brings Americans together the idea that if you work hard enough, you can make it? Like, it doesn't matter if you are an undocumented immigrant or if you are a middle-class kid or if you're a rich kid or if you're black or brown or white or green or pick your color. If you have an idea and you're willing to work hard, you're going to be able to make it, you know, to have a little bit in the bank and to have a roof over your head and to maybe have some kids and have food to eat and have some time to hang out with your friends. It can be a pretty small dream or it can be a really grand dream. But the idea is that people who are willing to work for something can get it, unless they are unable. And if they are unable for one reason or another, we help them out because, you know, it's kind of random if you're born with, you know, working limbs, or if you're born with the kind of things that make it harder for you than it is for others. So you help those people out. Well, one of the things that MAGA Republicans led by Trump are talking about now is the idea they're going to return to a merit-based system. Pete Hegseth as Secretary of Defense is a merit-based hire? Really? You know, a man who ran two small nonprofits into the ground, who has been cited with alcohol abuse, who has paid off somebody who accused him of sexual assault, who has a history of sexual abuse, sexual assault on people, sexual misconduct. That's the word I was looking for. And yet he is now one of the most powerful people in the world. That's not merit-based. I mean, one of the things that it seems to me could really enable Americans to take back this moment is say, you want to talk merit-based? Let's talk about how people like Pete Hegseth or people like Kash Patel or people like Donald Trump have risen to the most important positions in the United States of America by virtue of the fact somebody caught them and enabled them to fall upward every time they screwed up. And that's not merit-based. You want to talk about merit-based? Let's talk about some of these people who are doing everything they possibly can to succeed in America, and you're trying to take away their right to be treated equally before the law, their right to have a say in their government, their right to have equal access to resources, their right to an education, all of those things. So if we start really pushing on these ideas that we care about, the idea that billionaires don't dictate to us, that criminals aren't out on our streets, and that people can rise through merit, Those are foundational concepts, not only of the present, but also of American history. And that's a kind of language that's going to gather up a lot of that power and say, yeah, I really care about that. All right, so if that's the case, now how are we going to do it? First of all, you cannot do it all. You cannot do it all. You need to take breaks and you need to do things that make you happy. That authoritarianism 101 is do not give up your joy and your sense of humor, because you cannot, an authoritarian cannot rise if people are experiencing joy and community and they hate nothing more than to be laughed at. I mean, nothing upsets Trump more than being laughed at. So don't try and do everything, but think about what your issues are. So mine is I care deeply, deeply about the fact that we live in a reality-based community. I don't care that we agree about how to solve our problems. I actually like disagreement because I think disagreement means that you you get to better solutions. You know, sometimes you're right and sometimes you're wrong. You do the best you can, and you can be persuaded by other arguments. But we need to be all based in fact, all based in reality. So what do I care about? I care about getting those facts out there, and I care about supporting other people who get those facts out there. And one of the things, if you follow me on Blue Sky, you will have seen today is I've been retweeting and whatever it's called, reskeeting. By the way, if you don't understand what that is, skeet are the clay, is another word for the clay pigeons that people shoot. So that's why they skeeted it, I assume. So I'm really trying to amplify those voices that are getting out the truth. Now, if that's something you care about, there are things you can do. You can support those alternative medias, many of which are small, many of which are startups, and many of which are operating now solely off their dining room tables. That is, you could help them out. You could throw a couple of bucks their way. You could make sure people know about them. You could read about them. You could see if you can help them get grants to keep doing work. You could also do that yourself. We know that in communities where people did not have access to media, we call them media deserts, that space gets filled up by right-wing media like Sinclair. And what happens in those media deserts is that in the last election, some of them went as much as 56 points for Donald Trump because they believed the lies that they heard. So you know what? You could do the same thing that I do, but just do it for your community. Go to the local town meeting, go to a basketball game, go to the school committee meetings, read the documents that your townspeople are putting out and tell people what's in them. And there's a number of ways to do that for free. You can post them here on Facebook, although a lot of people are leaving Meta. You can post things for free on Substack, and it is literally as easy as pushing a button. So that's something that I care about. Support those people, but you don't have to be the person who cares about that. You could care about institutions. You could care about things like the Organization of American States, and you could start talking about the Organization of American States to other people, explaining why it has been so important that when he launched the Bay of Pigs, the one country that Canada went to, or the one group of people that Kennedy went to, was the Organization of American States. You know, find your institution that you care about, educate people about that, and find people who are supporting that institution if you find an institution you care about. Maybe what you care about is the protection of individuals who are now under attack. If that's the case, find people who are protecting them. And again, you can do this on your own, but start by finding out if somebody else is doing it, because you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And in fact, you can actually take resources from people who already are doing those things. And where can you do that? You know, people like me, I work at the national level, in part because of my training, that's what I learned to do as a historian. So I'm really good at sort of national publications, national documents. I'm really not very good at state levels. I'm good at state histories, but not at what's going on in the states currently. So one of the things you can do is, instead of worrying about what Trump is doing, because people like me are watching that, that could be your field, but you could look at the local level. Get people involved at the local level. Why does that matter? Well, in states like North Carolina, the Republicans managed to take over the state Supreme Court and carve up a 50-50 Democratic Republican state into a state that now has 10 Republican representatives and and 4 Democratic ones, because they were able to gerrymander. People in North Carolina need to understand that, and a lot of them don't. There is an organization in North Carolina that is doing that right now, and the Republicans there are trying to steal a seat on the state Supreme Court so they can guarantee those gerrymandered maps stay in place. Work at the state level. There is great people. There are great people working at the state level. Get involved at the state level, but not just North Carolina. Another thing going on, for example, is in Wisconsin. There is a state Supreme Court race on April 1st, 2025 in Wisconsin. Similarly, the Republicans are trying to take that to gerrymander what is again a 50-50 state in such a way that the Democrats can never win. Get involved at the state level. You can also join a number of organizations that are already out there making connections, working in different states to create communities that will defend democracy. And I'm not talking about small d Democrats who are in their own business of figuring out what they're doing, but democracy. And those, I work a lot with Red, Wine, and Blue, but they're not the only ones. Somebody wrote and said, is there a similar organization for men? Red, Wine, and Blue would be able to tell you that. I don't. I don't know the answer to it. But find an organization, find friends, and join them. And here's the final thing I will leave you with on tonight. And that is, it is fine to be concerned and to be worried and to be upset. I am. It is not fine to let that affect your health. You need to keep eating right and exercising. A healthy population is a hard population to subdue. It is very important that you make connections, that you are not alone, that you learn, you meet new people, you meet new communities, you try new things, you learn new things. That's my big thing, learn a new thing every day. I started a new book, by the way. It's going incredibly well. That you don't lose your sense of humor, because that matters. But here's the other thing. Channel that frustration and fear and anxiety into something positive. Do something positive every single day that moves the ball forward. And I always say 2 things. Do 2 things that work to change the public conversation. Write to a local newspaper, either in print or on social media. Make your voice heard that way. Respond to people on social media, not to trolls. Do not engage with trolls, but say, hey, I'm really concerned about the cost of coffee if he throws these tariffs on there. Again, you're not going to change Tom Cotton, but you could change some of the people who are thinking, who are voting for Tom Cotton. Call out these things I talked about: prices, the J6 people, the billionaires, the idea of rising on merit. Do things individually to look forward, but also put pressure not only on your elected representatives at home. It's not worth calling elected representatives elsewhere, because they simply will shunt you elsewhere. And similarly, emails they will say, unless you're a constituent we don't want to hear from you, write to them. Show up if you need to show up at always obeying the law, by the way, at elected offices. Make sure that you are making your voice heard and that you're doing so in groups. Support the people who are fighting the legal battles. Make that frustration and anger work for you, so that you are not living in Donald Trump's world, because there are 332 million of us. We are the richest country in the world. We are the strongest country in the world. And the idea that some weenie is going to come in with a bunch of misfits and take over our government is only possible if we allow it to be. So that's my pep talk for you today. I'm trying all sorts of new things. I have upgraded my my internet in this place, and with luck we'll be able to do this on YouTube, which you've asked me to do, and we'll start to be able to interview people to talk about America and what we care about here. So stay tuned, but I will obviously try and do these more often, because it seems like you like to know that you're part of a bigger community, and I'm telling you, I'm here for that. Thanks for being here. Talk to you soon.